Okay, it is 6 o'clock p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Northern Regional Advisory Council meeting. This meeting is being held at the Weber County Commission chambers, as well as being streamed live on YouTube. This public forum allows you to express your opinions and ideas on wildlife management in our state. This RAC considers your feedback on the proposals before us today and reports them to the Wildlife Board. The Wildlife Board, not the RAC, is charged with setting wildlife policy for our state. Wildlife management is complex and it's sometimes emotionally charged. We all have ideas and opinions about what is best for Utah's wildlife. It's why we are here today, and that's a good thing. We encourage those who want to express their opinion at today's meeting to fill out a comment card. We expect those in attendance to respect the people who speak, especially those who hold views that don't align with their own. Respectful behavior helps facilitate efficient meetings where RAC members can listen, digest, and address the concerns, ideas, and proposals being presented for consideration. Disrespectful behavior includes booing, yelling, cheering, or laughing while someone is speaking. You can also help maintain a respectful space by referring to people by name instead of descriptors of their physical characteristics, demeanor, or gender. If this behavior occurs, the RAC Chair will remind attendees to be respectful. If the behavior continues, the applicable individual will be asked to leave. Lastly, please help reduce distractions during the meeting by putting your phone on silent. If you need to take a call, we ask you step outside. One other note, we've been asked as we exit tonight to please use the door out to the west side of the building here as we leave. Thank you. Okay, we'll start off welcoming RAC members. Let's go through introductions. Start over here with Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Butler. I represent non-consumptive users.
Marshall Alford, representing the Forest Service.
James Carlson at large.
Steve Sorensen, representing Sportsmen.
Ross Worthington, public at large.
Bob Dale, public at large.
David Ag.
Darren Perry, Shoshone Nation.
And I'm Brad Buchanan, also a Sportsman's rep. We would like to excuse Ryan Brown, Junior Goring, Randy Hutchinson, Jessica Wade, and Nikki Waymont from tonight's meeting. I'd like to welcome DWR staff, specifically those that provide presentations and are available to answer questions, specifically Jason Jones, Darren DeBloois, Devri Tanner, I hope I said that right. Yeah, okay. Rusty Robinson and Jason Robinson. I'd like to welcome the public that are attending in person and are watching on YouTube. Those that are attending in person will have the opportunity to provide comments regarding the agenda item. If you wish to make a comment, you must fill out the comment card for the item you wish to address and pass it to Jody over here. She'll get it to us. The public watching on YouTube will not be able to provide live comments during the meeting. However, presentations were provided for viewing online and the public was able to provide comments to the RAC members for the meeting. Okay, let's start off with an approval of the agenda for tonight and the minutes from our last meeting. Call for a motion for approval.
I'll motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
Okay, motion by Marshall, seconded by Ross. Call for a vote, Jamie. Well, let's just do a raise of hands. Sorry.
Can I approve the minutes? But I wasn't here last time can I approve the agenda and not the minutes because I wasn't here to?
Yeah, or you could choose
abstain.
To abstain if
I'm going to abstain.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Let's just call for a raise of hands for a vote. Motion passes. 7-4 and 1 abstention. All right. We haven't had the next Wildlife Board meeting yet since that's tomorrow. So no update from our last meeting with the mule deer management plan. That all happens at 9 a.m. tomorrow in Farmington. So let's move on to regional update.
Mike, do you have that presentation? Okay, perfect. Okay, so it feels like it hasn't been too long since we gave our last regional update, probably a month or maybe less. So a few things going on, just wanted to update everyone about. So starting with the wildlife section, we just recently finished our pheasant releases for the year. It's a pretty busy month for a lot of our staff in the region. We released about 4,000 pheasants this year, so hopefully everyone had a chance to get out and chase a few of those. I know it kept us busy and a lot of birds that we put on the ground. Also, we're wrapping up our postseason deer classification, so there's a few more units we're collecting a little bit more data on, but we're excited to get that. That really helps inform our models and permit numbers this spring. So we'll be analyzing that data, and that'll be part of our recommendations coming to you this spring. Lastly, some deer capture and collaring efforts. We caught deer on the Cache unit and the East Canyon unit this year. We caught 40 deer up on the Cache, and then we caught 10 on the East Canyon. We'll be doing 10 more later this year, probably in January, February. So Jay will be running that effort and be a good opportunity if RAC members want to get out. Another pretty interesting thing that we did in last month, so we caught some goats down on the Beaver unit on the Tusher Mountains and released them on Willard Peak. It was a great experience. As you can see, this really awesome picture down here in the bottom right corner. We did have one goat though that didn't want to be on Willard Mountains apparently, and so stayed there for a little bit and then started heading due east, crossed across Inman Creek and the mountains, and then dropped down the sagebrush. Spent a little time trying to be a sage grouse and a pronghorn, didn't like that, and headed back, and as of right now it's about right where we let it go. So it was a pretty interesting movement. It got to I think about 3 miles or so west of Woodruff before it headed back. So how it made it back to exactly where we released it, we don't know, but we're also not goats. But if we did understand, maybe it's not as impressive, but we all thought it was pretty neat. So. On the Great Salt Lake, it's brine shrimp harvest season, so we are about 23 million pounds of cysts that have been harvested so far. And we've also been seeing a big eared grede die off on the lake. John Nuff flew this afternoon and counted about 20 to 25,000 grebes that have died out in the lake. So we're collecting some of those for testing. We should know what that is in the next couple weeks. But a lot of those birds will probably be around for quite a while. So if you're out on the lake, you may see those kind of floating around for quite a while now. They get in that brine and are preserved, and they tend to stick around for quite a while. We also had some exciting news. The state recently received $50 million, and that's going to go directly to the Great Salt Lake. So a lot of that will be for infrastructure projects and other things going on the lake. So we're excited about that, and we'll put a lot of that money to good use. In our law enforcement section, they were quite busy this fall, especially on our waterfowl management areas. They put in over 1,200 hours patrolling, and a lot of that went on the public shooting grounds looking at trumpeter swan harvest. They issued 252 citations, and those were directly on our waterfowl management areas. Dave wanted me to point out those are mostly warnings, so they weren't all citations, but they were out there doing good things and keeping people honest. We did have 8 trumpeters that were shot this year, so we didn't reach the quota, which was good. We were worried there for a bit. We were shooting up in trumpeters pretty quick, but then it kind of leveled off and didn't get many towards the end of that season. We also kind of an exciting development in the Department of Natural Resources. We're going to have a new law enforcement section starting January 1. So all of our officers will be transitioning to that new division, but we'll still be doing lots of great wildlife enforcement activities around the state. This is a picture of their new patch, so it's pretty cool, and we're excited for them. In our aquatic season, they've been wrapping up field work and starting into a lot of their reporting throughout the winter months. We recently finished up some Arctic grayling sampling on Washington Lake. We're hopeful that those samples will allow us to start a grayling stocking program using those fish to take around the state for stocking efforts. We also just put some Bonneville cutthroat in some of the strings along the Wasatch Front, and are also doing some surveys on the Bear River above Cutler Reservoir. We've also been monitoring the whitefish spawn on Bear Lake this year. The spawn's just about over, but what we learned from that is that there's a lot of really big whitefish out there. So if you're into catching whitefish, it may be a great chance to go catch one. Our biologist saw a lot of big fish and potential state records out there. So pretty cool opportunity if you want to get out and fish on Bear Lake. In our habitat program, we've had a couple of vacancies that we've filled since we met last. As I mentioned last time, Daniel Olson went to our Salt Lake office, and we've replaced his position with Melissa Erdy. So she's our new habitat manager, and we're excited to have her in the region and all the great stuff she'll be doing for our habitat program. And we also added Jay Eggett as our maintenance supervisor. So if you know Steve Hunt, he replaced him. So he'll be doing a lot of our WMA work in the region and also a lot of our facilities management. Another project that our habitat section is working on is more fencing projects. We're trying to wrap those up before the snow starts flying. So taking advantage of the open slopes that are still out there. This is a picture from our Coldwater WMA just from a day or two ago. Out there collecting fence, removing some of that mesh wire stuff, which should be great for wildlife in the future and less hangups and those fences that are out there. So lastly, as I mentioned, there are a few more areas we're doing a little bit of deer classification. So if you want to get out, touch base with us. There's probably not a whole lot of opportunities to do that this fall. And then turkey captures, we'll be doing that throughout the winter. So as soon as it starts snowing, that really will pick up. So if you want to get out and help us catch some turkeys, that opportunity exists as well. Okay, and that's all I've got. Any questions from the RAC? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Blair. We want to recognize Casey Snyder has joined us online, so welcome him. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 5, waterfowl recommendations 2025 to 2027. Jason.
Good evening. Appreciate being here.
You got any clarifications or anything that you feel we need to?
I feel like everything's pretty well covered in my presentations.
Okay. All right, let's start with any questions from RAC members. Jason, I should have asked the question earlier. Our swan harvest, since this always comes up in our meetings, where are we at with, where do we end up with?
With trumpeters.
Mm-hmm.
So last year we ended up at 9, and that all happened right the first week in November, and we were all kind of holding on to our hats. And the same thing happened this year. That first week in November, it heated up, and I got kind of worried, and then it just kind of died off. Okay. And we ended up at 8 this year, 9 last year.
Just some more clarification. They were talking, I know this came up a year or 2 years ago, trying to figure out that classification, because it's, if I remember correctly, we're getting counted into areas that are of concern with what those numbers are. But from what I understand, the trumpeters coming through aren't part of that migratory or something like that, if I remember correctly. Has that moved any direction or anything like that?
Just to provide a little clarification, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but we have a 20 bird quota, and that's based on what they call the U.S. breeding segment of trumpeter swans. And for reference, that's a pretty small population. It's around, the population objective is around 600, and that's a pretty small population for our quota to be based on. Nevada's quota is also based on this U.S. breeding segment. And then we have the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans, and that's a much more robust population. And for several years, we sent in feathers to the USGS because we want to really understand where the birds from Utah are coming from. We're still waiting on peer-reviewed results. I do have preliminary results. I talked to the USGS on a Google Meet. To really push any changes at the flyway level, we're going to have to wait for those peer-reviewed results. But I do know that out of the 40 birds that we sent in, 38 of those birds were from the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans, and that's good for Utah. And we've started the conversation at the flyway level. Blair is actually chair, and I'm the study committee. So we've started conversation with Fish and Wildlife. This goes back to an environmental assessment from the early 2000s that kind of guides our swan hunt and gives us this quota. So we've kind of started the conversation that we'd like to see change. Fish and Wildlife realizes that the environmental assessment is stale. And so that's kind of a good direction. I think it's going to take time. We're going to hear more results at our winter flyway meeting. I'm interested to see where the birds from the other states came from, because for instance, Montana doesn't have a quota because it's assumed that the birds they're shooting up there is based on this more robust Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans. So 38 of our birds actually are from that population, and 2 came from the U.S. breeding segment. So that's good for Utah. Hopefully that answers your question.
I know they can't keep the trumpeters now. Can they keep hunting for a tundra swan after they've shot a trumpeter?
Right now, yeah, I was just talking to Lieutenant Beveridge about that, and I think that's probably going to change in the future, but still you can go back in and get your tag for a tundra swan.
Okay. Any other questions from RAC members? Any questions from the public? Okay. Move to public summarize public comments.
All right, so we had 5 responses for this agenda item. We had 20% of those strongly agreed, 60% somewhat agreed, and 20% were neutral. So that weighted average is of 4. And some of the comments we had kind of a little bit across the board. We had some about accessibility on blinds on Utah Lake and some of our WMAs specifically for ADA accessible blinds. So there were some comments about those. We had a comment about wanting to see more veterans hunts, also changing shooting hours to official sunrise for better identification purposes. Some interest in not seeing AIS stickers being required for watercraft on waterfowl management areas, and then some better maps for a Wasatch Goose Zone. There was a comment about having a shorter regulation cycle due to the political climate, which I don't know if you want to address, Jason, but I know it probably doesn't impact much of what just happens with waterfowl regulations. And we had a comment about moving the scop season towards the end of the season so that it's similar to what we've done in southern Utah for the last 6 or 9 years. And also having more opportunities for youth and making that hunt 2 days instead of 1.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any public comment cards for this agenda item, so I'll open it up to RAC discussion. Okay, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we approve the waterfowl recommendations for 2025 through 2027 as presented.
I'll second.
Motion by Robert, seconded by Ross to approve as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll do a quick roll call vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay. Agenda item number 6, falconry reporting requirement recommendations. Also Jason.
Made it too easy on me there. If you're not familiar with falconry, this reporting requirement change just makes things easier for falconers. They're required to turn in those 3-186 forms to the federal database. And we're kind of in the middle because we have to administer that database and kind of help them comply. And the rule also mandated them to send us a second copy to the state of Utah. So this eliminates that, and then it just cleans up some old language that's outdated. And we had support from the Utah Falconers Association too. They came and supported us in Springville last night.
Okay. All right, we'll start with any questions from RAC members.
Mine's just out of curiosity. How many falconers are in Utah?
There's, it ebbs and flows, but there's about 220 active falconers.
Okay. Any other questions? Questions from the public? Okay. Summarize public comments.
Okay, so this is about as easy as the rest of this item. No public comments.
Even better. Open it up for RAC discussion. Okay, entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept it as is.
I'll second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Marshall to accept as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote. Marshall,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Robert,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Casey,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, agenda item number 7, Utah Black Bear Management Plan Revision and Rule R657-33. Darren.
All right, I just have one note. We did catch a discrepancy in the packet on the NEBO. One chart shows that the overall permits on the NEBO is 26, and another chart table shows 36. That should be 36. There's just a little bit of a disconnect between a couple of pages in the spreadsheet they were using. So that's what we're voting on for the NEBO, 36 total permits or quota in combination. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good.
I've got a couple of questions, and I know we're working on some of the coordination with Forest Service as it relates to some of the potential permit requirements that infrastructure related to bear baiting would present, and how to navigate that in a consistent way across forests. I think we would like to see some individual identification markers for the infrastructure, and that seems like something that could be addressed kind of similar to the way that traps are marked.
Right.
Is that the case?
Yeah, a person that sets up a bait station currently needs to post that station, and so I think, and we're talking about barrels here, allowing people to use a barrel. So if they were to use a barrel, marking that barrel with their COR number is probably the best way to go if we want to do something like that. Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. I think if the RAC wants to discuss that and that's something you want to require, I don't have any concerns about.
I think we'd be interested in seeing the individual barrels marked. It's kind of consistent with the
One
traps.
point that was brought up last night too, and we're happy to talk about, however we want to do this, but we do record each location. A person has to register it on. And so, if a forest had a concern about a site and wanted to know who placed, if they leave the barrel there, they make a mess, or they cut a tree or whatever, we should have that data. We could share that data with the forest as well. So there's ways we can get at this, but we're happy to talk.
Awesome.
Whatever makes it easy for everybody.
I think that'll work well. Another question was, as far as identifying locations for a buffer on placement, making sure that we have a well articulated and clear set of sites. Basically, any and all occupied recreation sites, including trailheads, would be of concern for us.
Yeah, I think we could certainly look at that language. It's probably just a matter of defining what that infrastructure is. Currently, the buffers around trails and roads and water and trailheads would probably fall into that buffer range under that language, but it's not specific about we talked last night about a trailhead. What we'd be talking about is a trailhead that had facilities, some kind of infrastructure, rather than just some remote place where people park and then take a trail. But again, the trail's part of the buffer system, so
Yeah,
we're happy to look at that though. But that's a good discussion to have.
I think that'll be good. And the other one that came up, we manage a lot of municipal watershed areas, so those might need to be excluded as well.
Okay.
And then about the bait, are there requirements or exclusions on what can be used as bait?
There are some general exclusions, yeah. I mean, I can look at the rule language if you want to, but for example, chocolate is something that we recently took out. We had some concerns, at least back east, some cubs got into a lot of chocolate and actually killed them. So we took that out. But yeah, there are some regulations on.
Yeah, in general, we'd want to make sure things are, weed free and not introducing
Right. Yeah.
problems.
Typically people are using things like pastries and donuts and baked goods, things like that. That typically, they have to clean up afterwards, but they're not a huge biological hazard.
And then, I guess we haven't gotten into huge issues, but trying to understand and think forward with other special uses that we might have in the area, range uses and, rec events, there could be some things that we can't account for until that we understand the timing. But I think with those changes, this would be something we can consider to try and understand how
take feedback from the RAC on whatever, the RAC would decide if we want to look at any of that stuff, that'd be great.
Thanks. All the questions I have right now. Appreciate it.
Casey, you got a hand raised?
Yeah, I do. If that's okay.
Yep.
Can you guys hear me okay? I know there's a little bit of feedback on my end.
Yeah.
Okay. Darren, I'm wondering if you could speak to the cache a little bit. I know we brought this up a month or so ago in Natural Resources Committee. We've having quite a few bear conflicts in Cache County, bear sightings in town, campgrounds getting shut down, those types of things. So I'm wondering if there's any latitude within the recommendation to maybe bump up the numbers or allow specifically more baiting opportunities, just because bears are so hard to target. And we feel like, at least from a community perspective, we've got an overabundance of black bears right now. And I'm wondering what kind of latitude we'd have to do something on that before we get to a point of more conflict.
Yeah, certainly. The cache, because of the low harvest numbers, falls into one of the category of units that really is up to the biologist's discretion. And so, if you all feel like maybe the number needs to be a little different, we're certainly open to that. I think for the cache, and Sam or Jim can certainly speak to this too. We don't usually get a lot of requests for bait stations, and if we wanted to tweak the numbers, we might want to do that in the multi-season permit, and that way, a couple more multi-seasons, guys can hunt dogs and bait and spot and stock all seasons through the year, and that might get us a little bit more harvest.
Yeah, I would be totally fine with something like that. It just, like I say, we've had bears, especially this year, and I know there were some factors with the late frost and everything, but we've had bears in places that in my lifetime we have never had bears and never had this level of conflict. So just trying to get ahead of it before it becomes a bigger deal.
No, you're totally right. When I went to the cache, the biologist, it was pretty rare to see a bear, and when I left, there were a couple. Steve and I went and caught a couple. But now, yeah, we're starting to have some conflicts. So we definitely took that into account in the recommendation, but we can certainly make some adjustments.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Darren, I know I talked to you about seasons a month ago or so.
Mhm.
Since then, I don't know if you're aware, but the county shut the roads down, the main road you're going to hunt bears on in the cache, to May 15th. I believe that spring pursuit goes to May 20th, May 21st.
Memorial Day.
So
the pursuit, you mean the hound season or the pursuit?
the hound season,
Yeah.
the hound season,
It ends on Memorial Day that Monday. Yeah.
So I'm probably going to recommend something to where we run that season longer. I don't know.
Yeah, the only context I'd put that, Steve, is when the bear committee looked at this, we want to try to avoid bait and hounds in the field at the same time. It's legal to chase off a bait. So if the RAC wants to do that, we probably ought to adjust the bait season as well, and maybe keep
For sure.
those separate. So
Yeah,
just
and you're
bear that in
fine.
mind.
You're fine with us doing that. Where the
Yeah, I mean, we in general, we like to keep things the same across the state just because it's less confusing, but in the northern part of the state, and if it makes sense on a unit, there's nothing that prevents us from having a different season structure.
perfect.
Permit fees are legislative, right?
Yes, and we talked in the committee about lowering the spot and stock permit fee to maybe like $30 or something like that. we are planning on running that with the next time we do fee adjustments with the legislature, and we have to add a permit for that. That doesn't exist currently. So that's how that would have to be taken. And we do intend to do it, but we just need to wait for timing wise. So,
All right. There's somebody on the region here that might be able to help with that.
I don't suspect we'd have any opposition to that, but we just barely did a fee schedule change. And so we wanted to wait until it's time to do that again.
Watching your presentation, Darren, a lot of good stuff. You guys did a lot of good stuff, and I appreciate it.
Thanks. We're trying to be responsive, and you know, we hopefully this will help with some of the concerns we have, especially in the conflict arena.
Any other questions from RAC members? Okay, any questions from the public? Sierra, come on up. Oh.
Come on up.
I have questions. I have comments, but
Oh, I knew you'd have comments.
I just like to make you sweat a little.
Okay, let's summarize public comments on this one.
All right, so we did have one person respond to this agenda item. Those comments can be summarized as they didn't agree with the multi-season hunters being able to hunt both hunts. They felt like their tag should just count towards that season, and that they shouldn't be able to hunt towards the quota part of that season because it would just be more people out on the landscape. That comment also mentioned that they supported the barrel recommendation and support for adjusting bear tags when predators are concerned on deer units. And they wanted to make sure the division was thinking about that as they set permit numbers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, got one comment card on this agenda item. Sierra Nelson.
He said to don't push any buttons. I think he means the computer, but it might be his. I don't know. Hi, I'm Sierra Nelson. I represent the Utah Wool Growers Association, and I'm here once again. And I realize that at some point you'll be tired of pulling the string in my back because I always say the same friggin' thing, but it's still true. There's way too many bears. We need to get a handle on this before there is a huge problem. There's already a problem in the cache bigger than we even knew. They're killing my producers up there. They're eating the crap out of the fawns. We've got to get a handle on this by management. I'd like to see the quota go up. I'd like to see something go up. Something has to change, especially if we're going to protect our wildlife and if we're going to protect our ag in the region. You know, my producers that are up Logan Canyon are absolutely getting slaughtered. And there's so many people that like to tell me that this is just, oh, well, it's just up in the north. No, it's not. There's obviously pockets around the state that are worse than others, but it's a statewide problem. We've got to get a handle on our bears. And I appreciate the work that the division's been doing. They're fantastic. And they're working with us to try to think of creative solutions to this. But I urge you guys to do whatever is within your power to help us manage bears more effectively and keep the numbers within a better range. But especially on the cache, we've got to take more bear. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sierra. Okay, we'll open it up for RAC discussion. I will ask one more question. Of all the harvest objective units we have in the state, how many hit their objective? Do you know off the top of your head?
LaSalle's probably the only one.
The only one?
This last year. So it varies. It depends on the year and you know how bears were moving a lot more this year with that berry crop failure. And I don't know if that made it harder to hunt or not, but that this year that was the only one that closed.
Well, the past prior couple of years, has that been consistent that way?
It's usually one or two. It's not all of them. So those typically stay open the entire season. And success rates it's probably worth pointing out statewide is about 30% on those hunts, which is better than I would have thought going into it. It relates to the bear density. So obviously if you have a unit that has a lot of bears, success rates are quite high. And then on units like the cache where you may not see quite so many because people just can't run into bears. But
thank you.
I have one more question. The depredation that is being brought up, like by the numbers and what you're paying out, one's not equaling to the other, but
Yeah.
obviously those that are on the field. So is it, you guys break it down by
It's
area? Is it-
definitely a localized issue, like Sierra mentioned. There were two things that we asked our biologists to look at this year, and one is, do you have sheep allotments on your units? If you do, we want those managed as liberal harvest, and we want to keep bear densities low. We don't want to raise bears on the backs of sheep producers. And so we did that. We have a layer, we can look and see where we've got allotments. They also looked at where Wildlife Services was having problems. And so we did that. We also wanted them to look at just conflict in general. If they've got units that where they're getting bears in campgrounds consistently, or like in Cache where we had to shut down a campground, to take that into account too, and maybe be a little bit more liberal in the way that they harvest bears. So the intent would be to, keep a low bear density, or, some units, maybe just a bear here or there once in a while. But, and then there's other units where there aren't as many conflict issues. The third thing we ask them to look at is their fawn, loss of fawns to bears. We do have some neonate studies that look at that directly, but you can also look at your fall fawn recruitment, and bears can be a problem from time to time. It's probably a density question. If you got a unit with a lot of bears, it's probably a bigger problem than on a unit where bears are sort of interspersed. There aren't as many. They're typically not going to have enough. The fawns will die of some other cause if a bear doesn't eat them. So that's what they looked at when they made these recommendations.
So, but are they then seeing then that is the amount that's being paid out? Like you say, it hasn't changed much in the last 3 years, but has it changed?
Bear just kind of bumps along. The problem is, if you get one or two bears in a herd, they can do a lot of damage to one person.
Mm-hmm.
We had one incident where a bear killed 200 sheep in a night. They ran them in a draw, and they all suffocated on top of each other. And so I think we need to be sensitive to that and just manage accordingly. And so, we don't have to have, the bear plan allows us to have different prescriptions across the state. And these are some of the things we look at. So yeah, I mean, if you look at it statewide, it looks like it's fairly consistent. It doesn't change a whole lot, but if you're the guy that's getting hit year after year, then, that's pretty significant. So
it's just what I want to make sure there's more to the numbers than just the number at the end of it. Right. So,
yeah. And also, Department of Ag's been pretty proactive in getting out there and trying to address these concerns as they arise. And so you don't have as many losses because they get out and get the bear before it kills a lot more sheep. So that's good too.
That's gone into the change of some, like there was one or two that went from moderate harvest to more liberal, right? That's all.
Right.
Part
Yeah.
of that.
So if they had sheep allotments, we asked them to switch to liberal from whatever they were before.
Darren,
Yeah.
I don't buy the frozen berry deal. We seen more bears early on
Yeah.
than we ever have.
Did you see the berries though, David, up there?
May and
Service
June, there's
berry,
no berries,
choke cherry, and
and we're seeing bears early.
I agree with you. You've got more bears than you've
But in our
you've
Lost
had in
Creek
years
country,
and years.
we identified 5 different
Oh,
bears
okay,
on
yeah.
6,000 or 7,000 acres, and we've never seen bear there before. And you don't have berries that time of year, so it ain't the berry deal.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a lot of bears.
There were definitely some more conflict this year, and we're guessing it. That might be part of it. But yeah, if you're seeing them earlier, they seemed like they're moving around a lot more, and so those late frosts affect other things too. In the spring, generally they're eating plants, and if they're not there, they'll be looking. So.
Darren, do we know, so, obviously we talked about the cache again, but I think the harvest last year was 4 or 5 bears on the cache. How many did we harvest based off depredation issues?
They killed 6.
6?
Cache in Ogden, yeah, this year.
Off just because of depredation issues?
Yeah.
Okay.
Direct. So those 6 plus the sport harvest, so 10, which is quite a few for that unit historically. But and typically if we have high depredation take, we like to try and get sportsmen, give them more opportunity and let them take the bears before UDAF has to take them. But obviously if UDAF's got a problem, they're going to go deal with it. So we support that.
Thank you. All right, Casey, you got your hand raised?
Yeah. So Darren, is Sam there tonight? I'm sorry I'm not there in public. I just got back from DC, but I'm
Yeah.
wondering, I'd like to push that multi-season number as high as possible in a motion, but I don't want to get sideways with the discussion. So I'm just wondering if you or he can say, I mean, if it were me, it'd be a big number, but I want to be fair to the process. So
Yeah, I'll let Sam speak to it. We had 9 total permits last year. We kicked that up to 18. So any additional would be, it's already, we doubled it. But I'll let Sam speak to that, and I'm happy to let the region decide what they think is
Darren,
good.
while you're putting Sam on the spot, can you have him address the season?
Sure.
For 2 reasons, for the roads, and I mean, I wasn't gonna do it for the snow.
Right.
But the road, we're not gonna be bear hunting.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Sam Robertson. I'm the Cache Ogden District Biologist. So yeah, Casey, to address your question, we've had permits on the cache, but we haven't got the harvest from the permits that we've had in the past. For instance, 2023, we had 9 permits and not one of those permits were filled. So I think we can go up some permits, but I think we got to be careful, go up a few and see, because I don't think we have the harvest success that we think we could have. At least even this year with a lot of bears, our harvest success wasn't, 44% of our permits. So I think we can go up some permits, but we go up too many.
yeah, Sam, so is 3 additional multi-season tags? I mean, tell me what would be reasonable in that category in particular.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3, give guys an opportunity to hunt all those seasons instead of just one. So they wouldn't be limited like Steve's talking on that spring. They could hunt the other seasons as well.
And that's a big part of that. I mean, we had a little bear and the kid decided to take it because there was 5 days left and we're up to our neck in snow still.
Sure.
So there's that. How many people are doing baits? Do you know how many baits
I don't know.
are on the cache?
I'll see if I can find that, Steve. While we're talking about this, something that occurred to me is that, another option might be to reconfigure how we split the permit recommendation out. Maybe take some out of hounds and put it into multi-season, or some out of bait. Increase the opportunity and potentially increase the success rate for hunters, and that's a possibility too. Let me see if I can find that for you, Steve, real quick. How many bait hunters?
While you're looking that up, that the cash is included in the units for the spot and stock, correct, over the counter? So that just comes back to if we can get the cost of bear tags down for that spot and stock. I know there's lots of people that would spend, like they do when you go to Montana or Idaho, you pick up that extra wolf tag or whatnot. I do the same thing with bear tag. I know there's a lot of people that have said they'd do it. So, and because then at that point, you're just allowing harvest until you've hit the harvest objective for that specific area, correct?
Right. So last year, Steve, we had 7 hound permits and 5 bait permits.
Do you know how many bait sites that those 5 guys put out, if any?
I
I know you
Sam knows.
mentioned.
I don't know. I think it was probably not more than a couple guys. registered
Crazy
baits out.
to me.
So
Get a tag and not use it.
I'm not sure, what the deal was there. That's why I think a multi-season might be a better thing to go, but if Sam agrees. And
Any more questions for
Do
me?
you want to ask him about season dates? While he was up
I
here?
told his boss to
Okay.
make sure he covered it. I trust Sam to do the right thing.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you, Sam.
Sam, sorry, while I got you there, what would you think on the season dates on a proposal? Like just start at the 15th or start it earlier and run it I mean, you could probably still start it when you usually do and run it later, maybe, and then bump those other seasons out. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
Yeah, it's something I haven't really thought about right now, but I mean, we do run into that bait situation with the bait hunters coming in. And right now it's just 2 permits. So if it's something we want to change, I guess we can talk about that.
yeah, it definitely needs to be changed with the new road closures. And
then also
we've
if we
always had a problem getting up there in a truck. I mean, 8 out of 10 years, you guys know you're not getting up
yeah.
there.
And if we wanted to shift some of those to the multi-season, can give those guys more opportunity
For fall.
for fall.
Steve, maybe, if the RAC wants to look at that and votes to do that, we can, between now and the board, look at what makes the most sense and anticipate having some recommendation for them. And
That'd be
maybe talk
awesome.
to some of your guys that are hunting both and get a feel for it.
Okay, any other discussion from the RAC?
I'm going to bring up just something I requested last year that we passed, and I want to see it go back, is allow for people to obtain a second bear. Like if somebody draws a limited entry bear tag, but then they want to buy a spot and stock, just that they can purchase that second tag. I think it just makes sense where we're not hitting harvest objectives. If there are people that want to buy a second bear tag, why not let them buy that bear tag and harvest in those areas?
Do you have a comment, Marshall?
Yeah, I do. So for discussion, I agree with, the concerns that have been raised for other perspectives as far as the Forest Service's efforts to look for clarity and consistency across forests. We're coordinating with the Intermountain region in order to be able to make this a consistent answer as it relates to whether or not it requires a permit. We're not interested in creating a permit requirement for the infrastructure that bear baiting might otherwise present. So we're looking for the state's management to satisfy our concerns. And with that, I guess whatever motion we make, I'd just like to condition it upon accomplishing a nominal effects clause determination for no permit being required.
Any other comments from RAC members? All right, well, entertain a motion.
Since I'm the one with a caveat on the motion, I'll motion for support of the presentation, and with the caveat on conditioned on a nominal effects clause determination from the Intermountain region or applicable forests.
Okay.
Other edits are welcome.
Casey's got his hand up.
Casey?
Yeah, Marshall, I was just wondering if you would be comfortable adding a provision in there with a recommendation to increase the number of multi-season tags by 3.
I would not have any issues with that.
Okay.
And I'd like to see the adding of the ability to purchase a second bear tag as we had last year.
And the season.
So
We got lots of stuff.
Is that for the cash unit? I'm guessing.
Yeah.
A question on the season or the multi-season, would it make more sense to just do away with the hound and just make that, rather than there being the specific season, just making it a multi-season and just moving those over to a multi-season?
I think I'd be comfortable with that if, from my perspective, and this would be a Steve question more than mine, but I'm comfortable with that as long as there's that increase by 3. That's just the thing on mine end.
I think you'll do better if we can get up there. We've never been able to really get up there where the bears are hanging. So if Sam redoes the seasons to follow the road closures and that, I would be fine with what Casey said and your second bear tag, if that's not a big deal. I don't know if that's got to go, what process that needs to go through.
It kind of seems that the primary barrier is success rates, not available tags, just from listening, but yeah, I mean, if the harvest rate going up is part of the objective, however we think we can accomplish that would be appropriate to write in.
I got no issue with season day change either. I mean,
Hounds are usually your best bet, but it's just been a road issue. And now it's even more of a road issue. So I think we're good. Ross.
is my question on this season issue though, is because it sounds like they're not even getting used. Is that just because of accessibility, or sounds like there is some time frame where they should be able to and they never went hunting?
On the houndsman one, definitely. On the pursuit one. On the bait one, I have no idea. Wrong people, tags in the hands of the wrong people, because that's going to be higher success usually, Darren, than your pursuit one, correct?
Usually hounds is number one success rate, and then bait is second. Yeah. In the 60-40, kind of depends on the unit, but yeah.
Okay, let me try and clarify all this.
Glad it's
so,
Brad.
Yeah. So you've made, we don't actually have a second on the table yet. So let's do this. Let's, unless you want to withdraw your motion and restate it, or
I can restate it in an editable way so we can workshop it together.
that would be great.
Before you do that, you asked Darren if for like a tag ID on the barrel. Is that what you're still saying?
Yeah, that would be likely to be included in our nominal effects clause determination.
Even though the Fish and Game knows where every bait site is, they have to register them. You're still.
That's what we'd prefer to see.
Okay.
But also, barrels aren't required, right? Or did that pass that it? I remember it's they're not required. So you're still going to have an issue in that you got bait sites with no barrels.
So there's an issue if we have, I mean, containment of the bait is we're concerned about the sanitation, having the bait out uncontained, being able to control that makes sense. A barrel, we're also concerned about the infrastructure being left on the forest. So trying to account for both of those concerns, I think there's a way to manage for that. And having the best way that we can identify that infrastructure on the landscape probably is more than just the location of the barrel, but a number tied to the barrel. And we're looking at that consistent with how traps are also identified with a number that ties back
with the containment site. Do you want some type of number attached to the containment site where someone chooses not to use a barrel?
We're looking at requiring the barrel as part of the nominal effects clause determination, and whether or not that would work to address the sanitation concern.
Okay, so if you guys in the end ultimately go to, hey, barrels are now required everywhere, because right now they're not.
Right.
But that's okay. So that becomes a different conversation when or if that happens.
It's under discussion. And so because we don't have a nominal effects clause letter to articulate the position, I'm a bit behind the power curve on articulating the position of the Forest Service on this. So I'm doing the best I can.
Yep, that makes sense. Perfect.
And are we talking just the cash, or are we talking statewide here? Because I feel like some of the stuff what we're talking about, like this whole containment thing, is statewide.
Right. So this is where
we're also making a motion for more tags and stuff just for the cash.
Right. So the Forest Service is coordinating our answer for the region, which the Intermountain region covers all of the forests within the state of Utah. So we are looking for one clear and consistent answer that addresses these concerns, but I don't have that letter and parameter developed to share it today.
Okay. So the motion is
complex. The motion is complex. So I can motion for the RAC to consider, and I'm going to open the floor to the list of concerns that this RAC has.
So I wonder, let me just, not to cut you off, but maybe just for clarification for the RAC, is if you want to make a motion specific to the Forest Service's stance.
Okay.
And if we want to make exceptions to that, maybe that
Then
would
we
be the
can go down the
cleanest
line.
way to do that instead of trying to get all of this together in one. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
I just want to tee it up for you so you can
Yeah.
get it written down.
That's fine.
All right. So for the Forest Services portion of the motion, we would want to condition whatever motion is made by the RAC on a nominal effects clause determination coming from either the forest or from the Intermountain region, wherein that specifies our requirements for canisters and baiting on National Forest System lands.
Okay.
And otherwise supported.
Okay. So let's hold this one just kind of as a standalone motion. Let's, anyone call for a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Darrell. Any discussion on the motion?
My only concern is obviously because it's not set, I get kind of where they're going. With the way things are ran at a federal level, at that big of a level, I get really nervous approving of something when we don't know the language yet. That's really my biggest concern. And then how does that then therefore get abused? I mean, does the forest, not to say that's what they're doing, but does you get the wrong people in the wrong offices, it feels like it swings one way direction or the other. And, then do we lose or does it just cause problems later on down the road? That's would be my biggest concern. I don't know if you can speak to that and kind of who makes those calls.
I'm with you there, Ross, where they can just contact any game warden and look that bait site up, whose it is.
Yeah.
They know about every one of them, unless it's illegal, and then
Okay.
I mean, are you?
Was there a question there?
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, because you guys are basically at the discretion of who's over Forest Service. I forget the.
Yeah. So the Forest Service has the ability to determine whether or not a use that necessitates infrastructure or placement of, infrastructure resources on forest land requires a permit. And so we need to satisfy whether or not this is sufficiently managed by the state in order to not require a permit. And we would be articulating what those management thresholds for sufficiently managed by the state are in this nominal effects clause letter. And because I don't have that letter, we're interested in finding a solution that allows the state to manage it with no permit required from the Forest Service. But I don't know what those parameters are specifically because I don't have a letter drafted to reference for you. So that's the best answer I can give with a forecast on how we are trying to be a good partner in finding a solution this way.
I know in Idaho, there's nothing. Just buy a permit from the Idaho Fish and Game, a tag.
Right. It's part of the inconsistency that we have within the Intermountain region. And part of what we're trying to clean up.
Is a barrel really considered infrastructure if it's just going to be there for a month?
Many forests have considered that infrastructure, yes.
It might be helpful to know, we have been talking to the region and we've shown them our rule language and they were comfortable with it as of a couple of weeks ago. This seems like it's ballooning and maybe getting a little bit more. All we're really talking about is allowing the use of barrels at bait sites. All this other stuff is currently in place. We do have, I'm comfortable if we want to clarify the current language to make sure it's clear what kind of things people need to place their baits away from in order to minimize conflict with the public. I'm getting a little nervous that the longer we're talking here that it might be easier just to have the state regulation for what's legal in terms of hunting bears. And then if the forest has some additional, maybe they need to have a permit. If it's going to get complicated or we don't know what the rule language is.
Just to clarify, we are not trying to complicate
I
this.
understand.
We're trying to work with you
I
to make
understand.
sure that we can find a good solution together. So we are not interested in developing a permit for this. So that is an additional workload that we are specifically not trying to create here.
So, yeah, I mean, right now we have buffers. They include trails, which would include trailheads. They include campgrounds, and I'm okay looking at that language, and if we need to tighten that up, that'd be great. I'm just not totally following, and just want to make sure that you're getting my thoughts, I guess is all I'm saying.
And again, I get it. I just, sorry, not conspiracy theorist, but it's like when you're asking for, it just always makes me nervous when you're approving on unknown language.
For sure. Maybe this will help. When talking about approvals, the
Yeah.
ability to approve this in a consistent way statewide does not exist at the forest level. It exists at the region level. And while I work for a forest within the region,
Mm-hmm.
there is not the ability to make that decision and articulate that stance sitting on this rack tonight. So that ambiguity is what you're picking up on. Please don't misconstrue that for lack of partnership.
Okay. Let's restate the motion before we call for a vote. So, so the motion is that this is conditional on a nominal effects clause determination from the Forest Service or the Intermountain for bait sites. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
No.
Robert?
It'd be yes, but did we have a second on this motion? I don't recall.
David? Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
then it is yes.
Thank you for checking on that. David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
And Ross?
No.
Motion passes 6-3. Give James, Steve, and Ross opportunity to state your reasons.
I just feel like there needs to be more in written rule, and I feel like that the division's proposal right now is good enough for me instead of trying to adjust until we have stuff more in writing about what's being approved.
Okay. Steve?
Just what Ross brought up about not knowing what we're voting on mainly. And then I think Darren's done a really good job at doing this.
Okay. Ross, anything you want to add?
No, the state's verbiage, I think, is right. And it's not that I don't think also for the fort that there's per se a hidden agenda by the region. But again, I just am voting yes to language that you don't know is just, to me, not good policy.
Okay.
It would only apply to forest lands.
Okay. We had a couple other things. So I'll entertain any other motions.
I'll make a motion that we start the bear hunt, the hound part pursuit at the regular time it's always started, but run it into June or run it into when Sam thinks is good. And then bump those back. I don't know. I mean, I'm putting Sam on the spot. I don't know
And this is just on the cash?
Yeah.
Cash Ogden? Okay.
Yeah. And then just bump those other seasons back. I mean, I know that's going to be a mess, Sam, but something's got to be done there with the gate closures.
Okay. So I have a motion to extend the hound season to account for the road closures and lack of access for hound hunters.
Yep. And add 3 bear tags to what Casey was saying. to the
Multi-season.
Multi-season.
Okay. So motion to extend the hound season on the cache to account for the road closures and add 3 permits to the multi-season bear hunt.
I'll second that.
Okay, seconded by Marshall. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I just want to back Steve up on this because let's let the sportsmen take these bears. That's why we have them. I mean, I guarantee agriculture don't want them. So if we can make more opportunity for the sportsmen, that's where we need to go. There's no sense in taking a trophy bear and wasting it in a snare, you know?
Yeah. You've done, I feel like you've done a good job of getting sportsmen involved with the Utah trappers and having them there, you know, on those problem bears you had this year, David. So yeah, I'd really, really, really would like a sportsman to take them rather than wildlife services. But of course they're going to do it if they're in your sheet.
The only question I had that I mentioned that we said maybe doing is, do you want to take the currently just 2 tags that are allotted just for that and turning those in addition to 3 additional into multi-season?
I mean, I think that's what Casey wanted was 5
So it's
multi-season.
basically not having the hound season, but increasing, doing away with the hound and creating essentially the 2 plus 3 additional multi-season.
Do away with the hound?
It's not do away, but essentially rather than having those separate 2 and making them all multi-season.
The 2.
Yeah.
There's already 2, adding 3, so it'll be 5.
Yeah.
Multi-seasons. They'll be able to hunt the spot and stock. They'll be able to hunt everything. Okay. Is that how you had it, Casey?
Yeah, I mean, how many hound tags are on there? I don't remember. Or maybe he knows.
Right now, the recommendation is 3 multi-season, 2 hound, 4 bait, 1 fall hound, and a quota of 10 for spot and stock. So this would make 6 multi-season if we add 3.
How many hound tags did you say there was?
4. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the recommendation sheet, so we got our wires crossed somewhere.
So a total of 10? 4 plus 6?
Why don't we just decide how many you want?
If there's,
It sounds like what
there's more than 2 hound tags.
It was only 1 multi-season last year, and then it's what's the recommendation this year?
Right now, I've got 3 recommended.
So we want.
Did you get in and change some already? Okay. All right, got it. So
If you've got 3
with what you've
recommended,
got in your packet, we were in here looking at this. It would be 4. Right, 4 total.
that's with the 3 we're trying to add.
Right. So I'm sorry about the confusion. We
Yeah.
got into this. The table I'm looking at, we actually got in, we're looking at some things. And so the recommendation that you have on the table was 1. So adding 3 would be 4 multi-season. And then everything else is the same, right, Sam? So 4 multi-season, 2 hound, 4 bait, and 1 fall hound. And then
There's only 2 hound tags in the cache.
right now, that's the recommendation. Yeah.
Oh man, that's why David's getting munched. I didn't know there was only 2. I would have said something to add some to that too, but
So if we get to pick a number, do we want to move that up to like 6 multi-season and leave the 2 hound, or do you just go anyways? Casey, do you have any thoughts?
I was assuming
I'll defer to the committee. I just want those multi-season. However you get to that number, I'm totally fine with.
I was under the impression, Casey, we would be around 5 or 6 multi-season tags. Were you thinking the same thing?
I'm trying to give Sam the deference as the biologist as much as I can, and appreciate the latitude and him coming to have this discussion. So I'm pretty flexible. I just feel like just for the committee, so you understand at least the impetus. I think that in the cache, if you had more baiting, you'd have better success. And so that's why the multi-season was attractive. And then the question to the biologist was how many more multi-season tags could we add? That's where we got that additional number. So everything else I'm ambivalent on and would support the committee.
Well, I'll just not to complicate things, and I'll just leave my motion as adding 3 and we'll be at 4.
So essentially what this does, Steve, is it takes those 4 tags and spreads and they can hunt all the seasons. So you're essentially adding 4 opportunities to each season on top of what you've got now.
Okay.
Did they know the success rate on that multi-season?
I can look. Yeah, I mean, it's not, it depends on whether they kill one or not.
Add those 3 tags and it turns into 100% success rate. That's what we want, though, right? We want those bears
Yeah.
to off, and so that's
Right. The management has taken that into account. I mean, Sam has some concerns, let us know, but I think we can handle that. Again, we've had such low harvest success. We don't have real good data to hang our hat on. So we can make some decisions and see what happens. And if we need to adjust, we can adjust.
Would a 100% harvest rate necessitate reevaluating this next season?
I don't think so. We just haven't taken that many bears in the past. So
yeah, because they killed more on depredation than they did on tags.
right, yeah.
It'd be nice to get away from.
It'd be nice to have hunters be able to take them.
Okay. So we have a motion to extend the hound. This is only on the cash Ogden unit. Extend the hound season to account for the road closures and add 3 more tags to the multi-season hunt.
Marshall second.
The motion was made by Steve, seconded by Marshall. So, any other discussion? Okay, call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, that covers those portions of it. We still have the balance of the,
I'll make a motion to approve what the division proposed with the exception of allowing for those that obtain a limited entry bear tag to purchase a second tag for the harvest objective.
okay? Motion made by Ross,
Second it.
okay? Seconded by Steve to approve the balance of the black bear management plan as presented, with the exception of allowing limited entry bear hunters to purchase a second harvest objective tag. Is that right? Okay. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay. Takes care of agenda item number 7. On to agenda item 8, Utah Cougar recommendations and Rule 657-10. Darren.
Yeah, so this one's pretty straightforward. We're asking for 2 things here. One is to allow the sale of a green cougar pelt, and the other is to allow rim fire for ammunition to be used on cougars caught in traps. And that's just a couple of adjustments to the rule. So any questions?
I'm just curious if you guys have much data on what the harvest was been this year with this just spawn stock essentially.
Yeah, I can look that up. Should have opened it already. Sorry. If you want to ask additional questions while I do this, we can do that too. I just need to get to it here real quick.
Can you explain green pelt a little bit more
Yes.
for me, please?
So the current regulations allows a person, if they want to sell the pelt of the mountain lion they've harvested, it has to be tanned. So it has to go to the tannery and be processed. That obviously incurs some cost. And so what we've we've had some requests, and the board asked us to look into allowing someone to sell that pelt before it's tanned. And that is, we refer to that as a green pelt. So once the animal's skinned, it hasn't been processed at all, it's raw, allowing a person to sell that before they got it tanned. And we couldn't see, we didn't see any data or any concern about allowing that. They can sell them. It just skips a step. They don't have to tan it first. So that's essentially what we're allowing. Most Furbearer species, that's how they're sold. They're sold green, unprocessed, and then they go through the process once they're purchased. Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
I'm just curious. Why was the rule like that? Do you have any idea why that was different than other fur
I think,
bearers?
we've been in different modes in terms of mountain lion management over the years. And I don't know exactly why. I suspect, given the conversations we'd had and some of the planning and process, they felt like maybe making a little bit of extra effort and making sure that someone's preserved the pelt by tanning it would be the way to go. And I frankly just don't think it ever really came up until now. And so when it did, we thought, well, yeah, why not? So that's why we're recommending it.
Thank you.
I'm looking up the harvest.
If you can get it later, that's fine.
I
Move
got it. Remind me what you wanted me to look at. Success of spawn
Just
stock.
how many cats were taken just from spawn stock, essentially.
You know what? I'm not finding it split out. My recollection is it's somewhere in the 10% range. Oh wait, here we go. Yeah, about 10% ish. I can find it for you, Ross.
Out of how many cats, Darren?
Yeah, we took 550, so 50 cats, something like that.
Any other questions from RAC members? Okay, any questions from the public? All right. Summarize public comments on this one.
All right, so we had one comment for the Cougar recommendations. That was somewhat agree. The comment was agreeing with the green pellet recommendation as well as the use of rim fires to take cougars that have been trapped.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple, moving on to public comment, couple public comment cards. First one, Sierra Nelson, followed by Cody Bassett.
Listen, if I'd have got here earlier, I'd have done them all just to bug Darren. Sierra Nelson, Utah wool growers. Mostly, I just want to thank the division for the work that they're doing for years and years. All I would do is get on my little tiny soapbox and ask for more help with cougars. And the legislature stepped in and helped. The division's been helping, and we see the fruits of those labor when we see fawns, and it mirrors in agriculture. So we want to support the division's recommendations officially and thank them for their efforts.
Thank you, Sierra. Cody Bassett.
Cody Bassett, representing the Utah Trappers Association. We support the recommendations presented by the division.
Thanks, Cody. Okay, open it up for RAC discussion. All right. Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposal as presented.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion by Ross, seconded by Marshall to accept the Cougar recommendations as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, we'll call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, agenda item number 9, Utah Furbearer recommendations and rule R 657-11.
Yeah, so these are recommendations just for bobcats, fur bearers for 25, 26. So this is getting out there, but it's pretty straightforward. We're just adjusting season dates for the calendar, and for bobcats, same, the maximum allowable or the most generous number of permits and season dates, no permit cap. And then, yeah, if anybody has any questions, there really wasn't a whole lot extra here, so.
Any questions from the RAC? Any questions from the public? Cody?
I just got one question. You said in the presentation that you're closing down Franklin Basin,
A portion of it, yeah.
portion of it. I was just wondering the justification on why.
I'll let the region. You want to speak to that, Sam or Jim?
Yeah, Jim Christensen, Northern Region Wildlife Manager. So closing down a portion of it. So up in there, we do have some areas where there are some conflict that we will leave open around the cabins, down around the highway. But then up above, beyond that, we feel like we can close that down and really improve the habitat along the riparian area up through there, like we've seen across on other drainages on the cache forest.
Thank you. Okay. Let's summarize public comments.
All right, so this is another easy one. We don't have any public comment on this agenda item.
All right. Open it up for RAC discussion. Okay, entertain a motion.
I'll motion that we accept the presentation and or move that we accept and approve it as presented.
Okay.
Motion as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Marshall, seconded by Ross to approve Furbearer recommendations as presented. Any discussion on the motion? Call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, agenda item number 10, Coyote Bounty Rule Amendments, R 657-64 with, I hope I said Devri. I got that right? Okay. Any points of clarification or anything you'd like to share with us as we get started?
Nothing additional. If you've seen the PowerPoint, then that should be enough. Oh, sorry. No updates at this time. So if you have any questions or want to discuss anything, we can start.
Okay. Start with any questions from the RAC. No, so some of this with this change is working to obviously focus the harvest on to, I think it was defined as critical.
Yeah,
is the
crucial
word,
mule deer
right? Crucial
habitat.
mule deer habitat. How much discussion went into maybe reducing the bounty? I think in the map, it's the yellow shaded area or whatever it was defined as, and increasing it even more in the crucial, if that's what we're working to increase the harvest in.
Yeah, so we did talk about how much to increase and where to increase and whether or not we should take away the bounty outside of these crucial mule deer areas. Ultimately, we came to so in the rule, what we're proposing is just to take off the $50 cap. And then on top of that, we're currently recommending $75 in the crucial mule deer habitat with $50 elsewhere just to maintain, so decrease fraud by not creating a super big difference, but then also there's fringe benefits for agriculture and other things to maintaining a bounty statewide. And I believe that's what the legislature seemed to want with all of this, which is why we didn't remove the bounty statewide and only put it in crucial mule deer. And if the RAC wants to change like the dollar amount for the bounties, you can of course discuss that, and it's up. The legislature has asked us to do the bounty program, but we have the decision, or you all have the decision in the wildlife board to do the amount of the bounty. So.
Okay.
Sorry. Was there any discussion to make it maybe like 100, like for the mule deer areas or anything like that?
Yeah, so 75 is kind of an arbitrary area where we decided it would show us what an increased bounty would do without having additional fraud or anything. So if you want to recommend 100 or anything, that's up to the RAC and you can discuss that.
Perfect. I like that you guys, sorry, Ross. I like that you guys left it statewide. I mean, these things populate and move around. So, I mean, any buffer zones we can get on our mule deer is awesome. And, you know, I think it might bring mule deer back to where I used to see them as a kid out in these desert spots where there's no mule deer anymore. So thank you.
Just curious, how much fraud do you guys see? And is that just detected through what's turned in and doing the DNA testing? Or how do you guys, determine that?
Yeah, so we, in the past, when this program was initially beginning, there were paper compensation forms, but it's been in for over a year, so we've implemented an electronic application. And so basically this is an app you download on your phone, and you're required to take a picture of the coyote at the kill site so that the photo will be geotagged, so it'll have the time and location, so that when you submit it, there's less fraud because you can't write down whatever coordinates you want. It's specific to the GPS coordinates captured by your phone at the kill location. So there's a lot less fraud because of that app implementation.
Do you have it specified that you need to have that turned on? Because a lot of people turn that off to make sure that people don't know where they're hunting.
Yeah, so it's in when you first download it, it specifically asks like yes or no. And in our instructions, when you're downloading the app, it says make sure to approve camera access and location services so that you can. And the app won't let you submit your picture or your coyote without having the location tagged on the picture.
It will do that out of service too. When you get into service, Ross.
Any other questions from the RAC? Any questions from the public?
Yes. Sorry. Anytime we start moving money, my question is always, where's the money coming from? Did the legislature give you guys additional funding for this, or you're going to pull it from somewhere else? Can you kind of walk me through the money real quick? Because I'm always, where's the money, right?
Yeah, so the $250,000 that's allocated to this program comes from the legislature for this program. It's part of the general fund. And again, Darren can speak more to this. But initially it was $500,000, and we hadn't been spending all of that fund in the last 5 or so years, so they reduced it to the $250,000.
Yeah, so Sierra, we get a certain amount of general fund, and then we divvy that money between the different programs within, and so 250,000 of that money is earmarked for this program. Obviously, one of our concerns and thoughts when we were thinking about this is, well, what would that look like if we change these values? What does that mean for the current budget? It looks like based on the last 2 or 3 years, we'd be able to cover this change. Obviously, if we wanted to change amounts or reduce in some areas and raise in others, we'd have to look at it again and cross that bridge. But for now, for now, we should be able to cover it and still have a little bit of breathing room. And if we run out of money, we stop paying for the year, and they can bring them in the new fiscal year. And so they can get paid. They just might have to wait a little bit.
Okay. All right. Summarize public comments.
All right, so we had one comment on this agenda item. Someone agreed with the recommendation. And their comments were focused around agreeing with the $75 increase for reporting coyotes in critical mule deer areas, and also with the capabilities of the app for geo-referencing.
Okay, thank you. We will go to public comment. Let's start with Sierra Nelson, followed by Cody Bassett.
We always like it when there's less coyotes, right? So the Utah Wool Growers Association would like to formally support the recommendations, and we appreciate it. If you guys wanted to go up in dollars, we'd be happy with that too. So thank you.
Thanks, Sierra. Cody, followed by Brandon Zundel.
Cody Bassett, represent the Utah Trappers Association. We support the recommendations presented by the division.
Thanks, Cody. Brandon Zundel, followed by Kevin Norman.
All right, Brandon Zundel here representing myself. As usual, Kevin's going to come up behind me and say something smart after I make a fool out of myself online. Anyway, I really like the direction this is going. The whole idea of this program was to help mule deer, and it's doing an okay job for some areas. But as we can see in the heat map that was in the presentation, the vast majority of our coyotes are getting killed in areas that may not even have mule deer at all. And that's good for agriculture, and it's good for antelope, and it has its place. But if we want people to hunt these coyotes in this critical mule deer habitat, I think that the biggest reason they're not hunting them in those areas is because it's hard to get to. Steve talked about trying to get into bears earlier in the spring. Try to get into coyotes where these fawning areas are in April, May, or March. You probably need a snowmobile to get there. I don't know. I never tried hunting coyotes up where the mule deer fawn, but it's tough to get in there. So my thinking is we're not doing enough with this, the disparity between easy access coyotes and hard to get to coyotes. We need the hard to get to coyotes killed, but if I'm going to use my gas to go hunting coyotes, it's a heck of a lot easier to drive out in the West Desert than it is to jump on a snowmobile and head up in the hills where the deer fawn. So my thinking, and it's just my uneducated mind, but I think that disparity needs to be a lot bigger. And I'd propose something like $25 for a non-mule deer area and maybe $150. I don't know, you guys set the number, but a big number for those critical mule deer areas. That might be enough to incentivize people to get out there and hunt them where we need them hunted. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Kevin Norman. Wow us with your smarts, Kevin.
Well, Kevin Norman representing SFW, and I didn't want to be like my neighbor Sierra and get up here 50 times. So,
Remember, I live by you.
yeah, don't toilet paper me tonight. But SFW supports all these agenda items and these recommendations brought forth by the division tonight. And also excited about this. I tend to agree with Brandon. Whatever we can do to kill those coyotes in the crucial areas is we're all for. So thanks for the division's efforts and your guys' time on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, that's all the public comments. We'll open it up for RAC discussion on this item.
I like it. I just think if it's about critical deer habitat and saving deer and where deer need the help, I would like to actually see it, let's go to reduce it for the non-critical deer habitat and increase it in that critical deer habitat. Because a lot of these coyotes during fawning season, you can't access, without snowmobiles. So it's get us in the field in the right areas and reward people as such to help the fawns, help the deer habitat or deer numbers.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the discussion, and I like the idea. I think one of the other ideas that comes to my mind is maybe we increase it in the fawning crucial zones at certain times of the year, from May through September, when the fawns actually hit the ground.
That's a great idea.
I think that makes a lot of sense. As far as conversations about access go, depending on the mechanism of access, that might present some challenges for the calving that we're trying to protect. So it's not an access conversation. It's just understand where the edge of this, I think, is. So motivation and incentivization is a great approach.
I see where you guys are coming from, but I think Darren's done a really good job, or excuse me. No, oh, Devri. I think you guys have done a really good job of figuring out whether it's going to work budget wise. I'd love to see the in the fawning grounds be worth $2,000, but looks like you guys have done a really good job. It seems like it's going to work. Let's get a little bit of this, in my opinion, behind us and then look at it again.
And I do have like a little spreadsheet where I can type in numbers that we would like to see. So if you have numbers that you would like, we can look at estimates of past data. I'll just need to pull it up and stuff.
Thank you. You know, we have private trappers in the cache really target these fawning zones. And, you know, we've given them the maps of the BYU study of where the fawns are. And this is really going to help him out here. He's working for peanuts. He's been doing it for 4 or 5 years for us. And I'd, you know, I like the $25 increase.
But if where you're in support of them making more for the work and what they've been doing, why not pay them more in those specific areas?
Because I think you might go over budget. Got to come up with money, and that's never fun.
But we've only, I think in your proposal, you said the most we've paid out like 150,000 or something like that, 150 to 160.
Yeah, so the last 5 years or so, I don't think have exceeded 200,000, but I can look on the past annual reports. Those are all on our website. But this past year was 152,000.
It seems like when you hand out a couple felonies that the fraud goes way down. Sorry.
Yeah, so fiscal year 24, the actual payout was 152,000. The year before that, 189,000, and the year before that was 173,000.
If we took it to 100, would you still fall in there, or is that going to put us in the red maybe from what the average has been last 3 years?
That's my thought, is if the budget's there, we lost 250,000 of it because we didn't use it. Let's find a reason to get more of it back if possible.
I'm for that as long as it doesn't go in the red.
Yeah,
or
so
not too far in the red.
So if we move it up to, and this is based on just the past 3 fiscal years, because that's when we've had the best data that has crucial mule deer habitat tied to the location and everything. But if we keep 50 statewide, except for the crucial mule deer habitat being $100, then the past 3 years of data still don't go to the $250,000 limit. The closest was the fiscal year 23 would have gone up to 241,000, but it still didn't break that upper limit that we have.
Now we might see greater interest in people chasing it, which could go that higher. So then what would happen if you changed the rest of the state that's not deer to 25 and then you left it? I mean, where does that put your numbers at?
We've sorry to interrupt. I've been on the mule deer committee. We talked about this. And, you know, it's a slippery slope because you do have these populations expanding. You know, I'm seeing lions clear back east post, you know, trail camera pictures of lions. Everything's expanding. If we can keep them from expanding, that's a big win for mule deer.
And this was talked about a lot in the Central Region RAC. There's a paper done by Brock McMillan and then Kent Hersey and them from a couple years ago in the Monroe Mountain area, where they found that targeted hunting of coyotes, I think he said that there was a 30% increase or so in the mule deer fawn survival by targeted coyote hunting. So even though if you're not hunting coyotes during, like right before the fawning season, they are pretty territorial. So if your targeted efforts are in the same areas where they're fawning, then you can kill them any time of the year. Yeah, just for reference. And if you decrease them to 25 statewide and then 100, it's the projected changes pretty minimal. So because you're compensating, a lot of them have been killed outside of those areas, so it's you have even more wiggle room if you do that. But again, there's a lot of different ramifications you have to think about, like you've been discussing. So
those desert coyotes, I know lots of guys that chase coyotes, that's their thing and what they do. And those guys are still going to hunt those. I don't think you're going to see a reduction in the number of people that go chase the coyotes in those areas. When you see a lot of these competitions that they do, those are the areas that they target. So I think it's an incentive to move people into the deer habitat. And I still think you're going to get the desert harvest in the areas where the mule deer numbers aren't there. That's not what they're targeting. So that's why I would like to see like the increase for the deer habitat. And I'm okay with leaving it the same or decreasing either way.
Okay. Any other discussion from the RAC?
I just think this is cool that we're having this conversation because it seems like surrounding states are going the opposite direction, and the state of Utah is offering to pay us to go take care of predators. And so thank you guys for doing that. Appreciate it. And it's awesome to see us doing something about it.
I actually really like the idea of lowering critical areas to the 25 because you get kind of a double dip in terms of that and increasing the other. Comes out well within the budget from what we're hearing.
If we don't use that money though, we're going to lose it again. We've already lost half the money.
And I'd like to see maybe in the critical mule deer go up a little bit more, go 125, see what that looks at like, go down to 25, because you're disincentivizing people to go out in the desert to do it and to go into these critical areas when it becomes de minimis at the lower figure, but you're also incentivizing people to come when it's higher. So it's a double whammy in my view. If it stays within budget, I'd be curious what that number would be.
yeah, so if you have 25 statewide and then 125 in crucial, it's about the same as what it is currently. And I do want to point out there's on our current mule deer habitat, there is the crucial habitat where it's like the fawning areas, and then there's also substantial deer habitat in addition to the non-habitat. So there are technically 3 different boundaries, and you could change, because I believe some of the substantial habitat is out in the desert area. And that's also on the map for my presentation. I just didn't refer to it, but it's the blue areas if you want to refer back to that map at all.
So then it would be, to me, leave it in the critical and the substantial and just reduce it in the, my thought. We can come to that when we make a proposal. That's just kind of where I'd be leaning.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the whole point of what we're talking about is how do we incentivize the harvest of the coyotes within the fawning grounds. And I think for me, it needs to go to at least 100. I think that's right. Whether you take, I fall more to that side of let's try and push it and use up all the money first. And so we can have more of a discussion of getting more into the program than increasing the reward there and still not using it all up.
Especially where they can come in the next year and they'll be the first in line to get paid.
Yeah.
You know, if we did go over, that's nice.
Yeah. Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we up the bounty in critical winter range to 100 and then leave the rest the same for now.
Are you just critical, or would you do critical and the substantial?
Will we find on money if we do both of those? Sorry.
That's why I made
Been
this
awesome.
so we could have the discussion. So you were saying do 100 on both? Is that what you're?
Yes.
So the average increase would probably be about 60,000. This fiscal year 23 would be 257,000, which is slightly over, but then the other 2 fiscal years we have data for would be 197,000 and 233,000. And obviously each year fluctuates, but that's about budget.
I'm with you. I'll do in both of those, $100 in both of those.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Steve, seconded by Ross. So the motion is to accept as presented, but except for make it $100 bounty in crucial and substantial mule deer habitat. Any discussion on the motion? All right, let's call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 11, shed antler gathering recommendations by Dr. Robinson.
Oh,
Somebody
man.
put me up to it. Sorry, Rusty.
That's all right. Thanks.
Anything you want to clarify or start off with for us tonight?
Yeah, I can probably just summarize the item pretty quickly. About a year ago, we formed a shed antler gathering committee and discussed a lot of topics and changes that we wanted to make as a committee, and made those recommendations at the board last spring. All those recommendations we made were adopted and implemented, with the exception of one recommendation, which was to establish a non-resident shed hunting season that began May 1st. The recommendation was to have no season for residents, but a May 1st start date for non-residents. That recommendation did not get approved, and the board asked us to reconvene the committee and kind of revisit the topic. And so we did that. We met again as a committee, discussed that at length, and in the end, the committee was adamant to still not have a resident shed hunting season, and really the sentiment at the board was, let's not go down this rabbit hole that some of the other states are doing and treat non-residents differently or less fairly than residents. And so that was kind of the idea. But the committee decided we still didn't want a resident season. And if the board really didn't want any disparity there, we were okay with not having a non-resident season either to keep it fair. Really, there was a lot of discussion about non-residents. There was at least 5 different systems proposed, several different reciprocity type systems to treat different states differently depending on where you're from and things like that. And in the end, we couldn't reach consensus on any of the non-resident proposals. And so the recommendation of the division is to have no season dates for shed antler gathering at this time, whether you're resident or non-resident, and that we would commit to track numbers of non-residents and those type of things, and keep track of any trends if it's becoming exponential with other states closing seasons and things like that, and that we would continue to follow our emergency shed closure rules that are already in place during bad winters. And so that's the recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Rusty. When we say track non-residents, that's just through completion of the antler gathering ethics course. Is that how we're tracking that?
Yeah, that's the best way we have currently is, when they take that shed antler gathering ethics course, they have to use their customer ID, and we know exactly where they're from.
Okay. All right. Any questions from RAC members?
Sorry. Anyways, I'll just be that guy. So it was the board originally that didn't want separate seasons for resident and non-resident, correct?
Correct.
I missed. What was our reasoning for that?
The reasoning at the board was we didn't want to adopt the Wyoming mentality of treating non-residents differently, where, in Wyoming right now, residents have one start date and non-residents can't come until later. They have a different start date. And so it seems to be a lot of that going around in different states, and our board wanted to kind of take the high road and not treat non-residents differently.
To me, it's not just the hobby of gathering. It's a monetary thing. And I find it hard when other states are doing that we now monetarily impact our residents by not imposing a season. I don't know where I think you said you were on the committee. It would be, I guess, what was that conversation? Because I just feel like
What part?
just
Ross?
and not being able to come to a consensus on having a
We
non-resident.
came to a consensus, and just so you know, Rusty, after I talked to you, I talked to 5 shed committee members. 3 of us remembered putting it back to the wildlife board just how we had it, and the other 2, we were all wishy-washy. It's been a while, but 2 of them said what you're proposing, and 3 of us are like, no, we put it back to the wildlife board just how we had it in the original. No season for, it changed multiple times, Ross. First of all, it was no season for residents, and Idaho, who didn't have a season at the time, and Arizona would be welcome. After we got done with the committee, Idaho went and put a season on, so we just blanket covered it. Wildlife board didn't like that, and here we are.
Yeah, you're right. There was so much going on with the non-resident discussion, and I think probably most of the committee would be fine with a non-resident season to some degree of some sort. It's just there was so many different ideas on how to do that we couldn't come to consensus.
That we'd already hashed out in the committee for a month.
Right.
Yeah, if that's where the committee was originally, I mean, look, every state with every non-resident, everybody's making it harder for the non-resident, right? And that includes shed hunting. And I think our responsibility and the board's responsibility is that to our residents, not to the non-residents. So.
Okay. Casey, you got a question?
Yeah, so and I love the division on this, but I actually don't support the recommendation, and maybe a little context for the RAC committee members, and it goes a little bit with what Steve maybe said. So the division broached me last legislative session and asked me to clarify in statute the ability of the division to have a season for shed antlers, which I did based on conversations I had with the director's office and staff. And so that that authority was clarified in law and given to the wildlife board to make the rule. And it feels a little, I don't know, wishy-washy is the right term, or just, I don't know. Why go to all that trouble and go to all that legislative action to just at the end of the day say we're not going to do anything? And so I'm of the opinion that we should have I don't think we need a season for residents, but I do think we need a non-resident season. So.
Okay, thanks, Casey.
Casey, didn't you take care of some problems like private land on that too? You put it in that
Yeah.
if somebody comes from out of state and they're on a guest of a ranch, they can shed hunt?
Yeah, so I pulled it up just to make sure it's clear. And so it says basically to that point, notwithstanding whether the wildlife board establishes a season, a private landowner or a guest of a private landowner may take an antler or horn on private land, including a shed antler or horn year round. So private land was exempted. This was a public land rule. And again, the division was pretty adamant that we give this authority, which I think it's good practice. I don't understand why we're not using that.
What about during an emergency closure?
The emergency closure provisions, I can't remember if it's in this bill or if it's the one we did before. I think we may have done that a little earlier, but I can double check.
I can help you out on that one, Casey. The emergency closure one was that on private land, if you needed to move antlers in the course of normal agricultural practices, then that was fine. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Any other questions, RAC members? Any questions from the public? Okay, let's summarize public comments on this one.
Yep, so we had 2 public comments on this agenda item. One of those somewhat disagreed and one strongly disagreed. Both of the comments wanted to see a season for non-residents, so that residents would get the first opportunity. They also one comment said they wanted to see fines increase for collecting sheds out of season.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we don't have any public comment cards on this item, so let's open it up for RAC discussion.
It doesn't seem to me that this sets a precedent for treating out-of-state entities different than in-state entities that would potentially treat them different if we had a season for out-of-state and no season for in-state gatherers. But I don't think it sets a precedent.
I've gone back and forth with this one, and I'll be honest, it irritates me what Wyoming did, just because non-residents were singled out there in more ways than one with their wilderness law, but I won't get into that. But it's, I understand the sentiment of the board when this came through and not wanting to get into a tit for tat kind of deal with these other states. My concern isn't necessarily with that. It's that all the other states putting in seasons just tends to just funnel more and more pressure, probably to Utah and Arizona, about the last two without a season. And so this isn't, for me, it's not about trying to get even with other states. Is it the right thing to do to try and head that off before we see an influx of pressure? And that's kind of where I start to side towards supporting a non-resident. I've gone back and forth with that in my mind, and I don't know. Any other discussion?
How many non-residents come into the state to do that?
That's a good question. We've pulled the numbers since 2009. If we look at just like the last 5 years, it's actually kind of a gradual decline. 2019, we had 1,720 non-residents take the shed hunting ethics course. 2020 was an anomaly for everything because of COVID, but 2021, we went down to 1,640. 2022, 1,558. 2023 was an anomaly because it was closed. And then 2024 was 1,446. So we've declined from 17 some odd to 14 some odd in the last 5 years.
A lot of people, Rusty, on the shed committee, correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't like the fact that Colorado, Wyoming, and Nevada are closed, and they're coming into our state. That, that was a lot of the people on the committee, I think.
I kind of made my feelings already made, but it just, yeah, it's, and again, it's not a tit for tat, but it is a matter of, it's not just a hobby thing anymore. It is a monetary thing. And so in that case, and also as you brought up, Brad, I didn't even think about it, but for us in Arizona, the only one too, I think it makes sense to do it now versus waiting to where we're the last one and everybody's running to Utah.
I don't see the justification that I think you mentioned that you thought it was making a lot of sense to me that we want to take a high road. I mean, we treat residents and non-residents different in everything that we do in terms of hunting, as does every state around us. To me, the anomaly would be to not do it. That seems strange to me. That's why I don't get the high road aspect of it. That, not to castigate the committee, great people on it, but if that's the case, I don't understand it.
That's what I mean by it doesn't set a precedent. I mean, we do it already.
Yeah, and I'm with you guys. I tell them to stay home. There's not enough. The shed deal has fallen off like crazy in the last 3 years. Let's let Utah have the opportunity.
What if they're coming to hunt bears? You still want them to stay home?
Hell, the way they hunt them, it don't matter.
Okay. We'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to, I don't know how to best word it, but basically that to not have a season for resident, but to implement the season as recommended originally by the committee. I don't know what the dates were from that.
May 1st.
If that was the case, then yeah, what was originally recommended by the Shed Antler Committee.
Okay. So I'll have a motion to, basically reject the division's proposal and institute a non-resident shed gathering season starting on May 1st. Okay. A second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion by Ross, seconded by Robert. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
No.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
No.
Ross?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-2. Okay. David, you want to state a reason?
Just take care of Utah first.
And Steve?
I'm just gonna trust Rusty on this one and not go against the shed committee. Because people I called, we were all over the place, and three of us thought basically no, so I don't go against the committee I was on.
Okay. All right. Now on to agenda item number 12, West Desert Complex Deer and Elk Management Plans with Jason Robinson.
Hello.
Want any summary or clarification for us on this one?
Nope.
Okay. Let's start off with any questions from RAC members. And I just forgot the name. So I think it's West Desert. Is it the Swayze that we're increasing elk objective by 500? Is that the right one that I'm thinking of?
It's the House Tintic is the name of it for
Okay.
elk.
All right. What's the impact out there with horses on the lands? Is increasing that objective out there with the elk going to all of a sudden get us into competition issues on the landscape?
We don't think so. When we've looked at the area that's available, it's a huge area. There are horses out there. There's a number of different horse management areas, wild horses. Looking at the GPS data we have for elk out there and the available habitat and the types of habitat those elk seem to be using, we feel like this number would be compatible with both livestock grazing, other wildlife, and the horses as well.
How many elk are out there on that unit right now? Do you know?
Roughly 150.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Okay. Questions from the public? Nope. I'll summarize public comments.
We had no comments on this agenda item either.
Okay. All right. No public comment cards, so we'll open it up for RAC discussion. Okay. Entertain a motion.
I'd move that we approve the recommendation of the division as presented for the West Desert Complex Deer and Elk Management.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Robert, seconded by Marshall to approve as presented. Any discussion on that motion? Call for a vote. Marshall?
Yes.
Jamie?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Darren?
Yes.
Casey?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And Ross?
Yes.
Okay, that completes our agenda for tonight. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Any opposed? You can stay.